Berlin, May 1945. The smell of smoke still lingers on the half-burned roofs. The ruined walls stand silently as silent witnesses to a fallen era. The wind carries the smell of ash, smoke, and despair. Under a gray sky, women in worn-out dresses silently walk through the rubble. No more tears to cry, no more home to return to. Anna Weiss, 38, walks through the streets that were once the pride of Germany. With each step, she steps on her own memories. The days before the war, when her piano played in the small house by the Spree, when her husband, Dieter, sat reading the newspaper on the porch. Now, only the wind howls through the broken window. No one speaks to anyone. Only the clang of scrap metal and the broken whispers. Has anyone seen water? Has anyone heard from the West? Those women, those whom history will call by a simple name, Trümmerfrauen, women who clean up the rubble. Anna stopped by the collapsed wall. A piece of brick was burned black. She picked it up and put it in her pocket. Dieter, look, our Berlin is now like this. She spoke softly so that no one could hear. The words were lost in the wind, like a prayer sent to a faraway place where she did not know if her husband was still alive. Many women around her had the same look in their eyes, the eyes of those who had lost everything but still had to live. A young girl, not yet 20, carrying a skinny baby in her arms. An old woman with white hair, carrying a small cloth bag on her back. All her remaining possessions. They did not know where they were going, only that they had to go, because to stand still would be forgotten. Somewhere, an Allied loudspeaker blared, "Citizens of Berlin, the war is over. Hand over your weapons. Cooperate in rebuilding." The voice, though in perfect German, was cold and distant. It reminded everyone that they were no longer the masters of this city. As night fell, Berlin became eerily silent. No electricity, no lights, only the flickering flames of a few houses that had not yet collapsed. In a small cellar, Anna lit a candle. She sat in the darkness, clutching a small photograph. A picture of her 12-year-old daughter, Clara. Since the day the city was bombed, Clara had been lost when the people evacuated to the suburbs. Anna had been looking for her for 2 weeks, desperate and afraid. She didn't know what she lived for anymore, until at a certain moment she realized if she collapsed, who would tell this story? The next day, Anna left the bunker and stepped out into the gray morning light. The sky was covered with a thin layer of ash. The women began their work, picking up bricks, carrying earth, rebuilding each wall. There were no machines, no men. They used their hands, the hands that had held children, cooked, embroidered, now as tools for rebuilding. The sound of shovels hitting stone, people calling to each other, soft laughter echoed through the rubble. For the first time in months, Berlin heard the sound of life. An American soldier passed by. He stopped watching the women working. There was something in his eyes, surprise mixed with admiration. Anna looked up, met his gaze. She said nothing. They just looked at each other for a few seconds, then the soldier continued walking. It was the first time she felt something very strange. Hope. Anna's story, and that of thousands of other women, begins on days like that, in the ashes, in the silence, in the shadow of a world trying to learn to live again. In those rubbles, there are not only collapsed buildings, but also hearts being rebuilt. Come with me on Anna's journey to understand why. History has forgotten those women, but memories never will. On a June morning in 1945, the fog still hung over the collapsed roofs. Berlin was no longer a city, it was a giant open wound. Anna Weiss carried a pair of wooden crates along Friedrichstrasse. Once the bustling shopping center of the capital, now all that remained was charred windows and broken signs. She made her way to the American food distribution point. There, she had heard. Civilians could ask for bread and watery soup, but for Anna, what she wanted was more than food. She wanted news about Clara, her young daughter who had been lost when the city fell. In front of the aid station, a long line of people stretched out. Children, old people, women, all were silent. The dry tapping of spoons on metal pots echoed. An American female soldier, blonde hair, pale blue eyes, scooped out ladlefuls of soup and handed them out to the people. No one dared to look at her directly, because the line between victors and vanquished was still intact, even though the war was over. When it was her turn, Anna asked softly, "Have you seen a girl named Clara? 12 years old, brown hair, wearing a butterfly necklace." The female soldier hesitated slightly, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, there are a lot of children being sent to refugee camps in the West. Maybe she's there." Anna nodded, saying nothing more. She accepted the bowl of soup, but didn't eat it. The steam rose, blurring her tired eyes. That day, she decided to go, alone, towards West Berlin. The journey was not easy. The road leading to the suburbs was full of bomb craters and charred tank remains. Along the way, other women were also going, some looking for their children, some looking for their husbands, some looking for a meaning to live. Anna's shoes were torn, her feet blistered, but she didn't stop. Whenever she felt tired, she remembered Clara's face, her bright eyes, her innocent smile as she said, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'll be a doctor to cure people of pain." Now, it was Anna who was suffering from that pain, the pain of memories that had not yet closed. At night, she took shelter in an abandoned train station. Weary figures lay scattered on the floor. In the darkness, there was the sound of a child crying. Anna looked up, listening. That cry, weak but familiar enough to be heartbreaking. She walked over, trembling. A skinny, brown-haired girl was being comforted by an old woman. "It can't be," Anna whispered, her heart pounding. She moved closer, the light from the small candle illuminating the girl's face. Clara! They hugged each other, sobbing. There were no words left. All the sounds of war, all the pain of the past months, all vanished in that moment. Mother and daughter sat hugging each other until morning. The dawn light shone through the broken window, illuminating her dusty but life-filled face. Anna knew that from now on, she would not only live to survive, but to rebuild her life, to give her child a future. That day, she returned to Berlin with Clara. On the way, they saw a group of women clearing a pile of bricks. They stopped, looked at Anna, the woman holding her daughter in her arms, her smile faint but gentle. One of the group stepped forward and said, "We need more people. This city must be rebuilt." Anna put Clara down, smiled. "I will help." From that day on, Anna became a true Trümmerfrau, one of the tens of thousands of German women who silently rebuilt the country from the rubble. Amidst the rubble, they learned to smile again. Those women shared each piece of bread, each sip of water, each word of comfort. They told each other about their families, about the people they had lost, about their small dreams of hearing birdsong again, or of one day being able to wear a new dress. And gradually, in the clanging of shovels and buckets, in the soft laughter that echoed through the smell of smoke and dust, Berlin began to revive. There are journeys that begin with loss, but end with hope. Let's continue with Anna and Clara to see that even in the darkest days, motherly love is still the guiding light for humanity. In the fall of 1945, the first American trucks began to move deep into the center of Berlin. The ruined streets were filled with the sound of engines, the clash of metal, and even unfamiliar languages. The city, which had been bombed 1,000 times, now echoed with new sounds, not of destruction, but of occupation. The German people looked at the American soldiers with caution. No one knew whether they came with compassion or supervision, but in the eyes of many there was a vague fear. Was there any dignity left for the defeated? Anna stood on the porch, broom in hand, watching the convoy pass. Clara, now stronger, was carefully picking up clean bricks from around the yard to make a small wall. The woman smiled, a rare smile in the harsh months. That day, a group of American soldiers stopped in front of the house. The commander, Lieutenant Thomas Miller, got out. He was about 30. His face was tanned. His eyes were calm but profound. He spoke in a clumsy German accent. "We need a place to set up a temporary relief station. Are there any people here?" Anna replied, nodding slightly. "We are here, but if you need me, I can help." Thomas looked around, his eyes stopping at Clara. The little girl was covered in dust, but still smiled politely. Perhaps that image softened his heart. "Thank you. We don't want to bother you. We just need a place to distribute bread and medicine to the people around here." In the following days, American soldiers set up a large tent right next to Anna's house. They distributed bread, powdered milk, medicine. People were wary at first, but gradually they began to come. Anna, with the little English she had learned before the war, became an involuntary interpreter. She helped the civilians talk to the soldiers, take notes on supplies, and sometimes even guided them in cleaning up the area. Thomas noticed her calmness and courage. Once, when she helped save an old woman who had fainted in the crowd, he whispered, "You are really strong." Anna just smiled. "If you are not strong, how can you live, Lieutenant?" Humanity, which seemed to have died with the war, began to be rekindled from those simple moments. One afternoon, Thomas brought Clara a candy. She hesitated, then said thank you in a trembling voice. He laughed and replied, "You're welcome, kid." It was the first time in months that a child's laughter rang out among the ruins. But not everyone looked at this relationship with sympathy. Some people whispered, "She smiled at the American soldiers." Have they forgotten that these people bombed our city? Anna heard, but she kept silent. She knew that hatred only made people poorer and more miserable. And deep down, she understood. Those soldiers were just people caught up in the vortex of history, like herself. One night when it was raining, Thomas stopped by Anna's house to take shelter. He stood in the doorway, his hair wet, his coat dark. "I'm sorry, I don't want to bother you, but this rain is terrible." Anna nodded, giving up her place by the small fireplace. Clara was sleeping in the corner. The firelight bounced off the wall, illuminating the tired eyes of two people who had been on opposite sides of the front lines. Thomas looked around. The house was empty, except for a few old things. He said softly, "I used to think the Germans were scary, but now I see they are just people, hungry, hurt, and lost like us." Anna replied, her voice as small as a breath. "As for me, I used to think Americans were evil, but it turns out they know how to listen." They were both silent. Outside, the rain fell heavily, mingling with the wind howling through the broken windows. In that moment, between the silence and the rain, two lost souls found each other, not with words, but with understanding. When Thomas left the next morning, he left a folded piece of paper on the table. Inside was a small piece of map and a few scribbled lines. "The Western Orphanage, where there is a list of missing children. You might need it." Anna held the paper in her hand, tears falling. Even though she had found Clara, she still knew. Out there, thousands of other mothers were still looking for their children, and now she had a new reason to go on. In war, people easily hate each other, but in peace, only compassion can save the world. In that ruined Berlin between the German woman and the American soldier, humanity found its way back. In the winter of 1946, Berlin was plunged into its harshest cold since the war. Snow covered the collapsed roofs like a white blanket hiding the unhealed wounds. But hidden under the snow, life was still stirring, with the weak breath of people who had never surrendered. Anna and Clara lived with the Trümmerfrauen group in an old apartment building repurposed by the Americans. Every morning they went to the construction site, shoveled snow, picked up bricks, and piled them together to rebuild the first walls. Their hands were chapped and thin, but still resilient. No one spoke of victory or defeat anymore. Just living and helping each other live. Clara was now over 13. She was no longer afraid of explosions or the sound of airplane engines, but every time she heard the sound of metal colliding, she still trembled slightly. Anna always held her in her arms, stroked her hair, and whispered, "It's okay, Clara. The war was over." The girl smiled, but there was still a hint of fear in her eyes, because even though peace had come, Berlin was still like a giant orphanage, full of children without fathers, without mothers, and no one knew who they belonged to. One morning while moving bricks, Anna heard a voice calling, "Frau Weiss, Mrs. Weiss." She turned around and saw Lieutenant Thomas approaching, wearing a thick coat, his boots soaked with snow. He smiled softly. "I just came from the Western camp. I need an interpreter urgently. Can you help?" Anna nodded. Together they came to an old building that had been converted into an orphanage. Inside, hundreds of children sat crowded on wooden chairs, holding bowls of thin porridge. Whispers, crying, laughter mixed together. A sound that was both warm and heartbreakingly sad. Thomas led Anna around, introducing the American women who were in charge of cooking, distributing powdered milk, and medicine. One of them was Mary Thompson, a volunteer nurse from New York in her early 30s, with gentle eyes and a rare smile in the dying days. Mary spoke slowly through Anna's interpreter. "These children need more than food. They need to feel loved, but there are too few people to do that." Anna was silent. She looked at the skinny children with chapped lips and dirty hands covered in coal dust. Some looked at her with fear, others smiled faintly. A thought flashed through her mind. She said to Thomas, "We have to do something. We can't leave the children like this forever." He nodded, sighed. "I know." but America is preparing to withdraw its troops in stages. Everything else will be your responsibility. In the following days, Anna returned to the center every morning. She taught the children to sing, read letters, and tell stories. The children who were initially shy gradually began to laugh, talk, and run around. Clara also helped her mother teach the children to draw doodles with suns, birds, houses, and sometimes the new German flag whose shape no one knew. One afternoon, Mary brought Anna a bouquet of dried flowers and said, "You know, when I was in New York, people said German women were cold, but now I see you are the strongest people I have ever met." Anna smiled softly, maybe because we had no other choice. Between the people who had been on both sides of the war, the victors and the losers, a strange bond gradually formed. No one talked about the past anymore. They only talked about how to keep the children warm in the winter, how to have more milk, how to keep the bricks from cracking when it was too cold. In the eyes of Anna, Thomas, Mary, and the women around them, there was something similar, a quiet resilience, like a candle that never goes out in the middle of the night. January 1947, the snow melted, spring began again. One morning, the children rushed out into the yard, running in the rare sunlight. Clara picked up a small guitar, which Thomas had given her, and began to sing, "When the sun rises, Berlin will bloom again." The voice was fragile but far-reaching, passing through the broken windows, flying high into the sky. Anna stood still looking at her daughter. Tears fell, not from sadness, but from gratitude. At the same time, Mary came to her, handing Anna a piece of paper. "We are looking for ways to send the orphans to foster families in America, Sweden, and Switzerland. What do you think?" Anna was silent for a long time. She looked at Clara, then at the children playing in the snow. "If they have a chance to live better, then let them go." Mary nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Thank you. Perhaps only those who have lost can truly understand the value of life." That evening, when Anna returned home, she lit a small candle. She wrote softly in the old notebook that Dieter, her husband, used. "Today, Berlin is filled with the singing of children again. Perhaps this is the true beginning of peace." In the ashes, people found gold not in metal, but in kindness. Let us continue this journey where human love transcends the boundaries between winners and losers to rebuild a world for the children of the ashes. 1948. Berlin is divided. Invisible walls are rising up in the city, not of bricks and stones, but of suspicion, hatred, and lingering memories. In the West, American and British trucks are loaded with relief supplies. In the East, Soviet troops erect barbed wire fences, blocking all transport routes. People call it the Berlin Blockade, a war without gunfire, but still leaving millions shivering with hunger, cold, and fear. Anna is now 35. She lives with Clara in the old ruins, now in the west of the city. Every morning, she walks through the black market, and where people exchange a loaf of bread for a ring, or a piece of cloth for a few potatoes. The women who once helped her clear the rubble are now scattered. Some died of disease, some joined the American soldiers, some were arrested on suspicion of being spies. The city was like a wound that would not heal. Although the outside was dry, the inside was still bleeding. Clara, now 15, still went to help at the orphanage. She was smart, spoke both English and Russian, and was sometimes used by the officers as an interpreter. But every time Clara mentioned it, Anna kept quiet. She did not want her child to get involved in the political lines that were deepening between the two sides. One night, Clara said, "Oh, Mom, I heard people say that if Berlin is no longer supplied, we will starve." Anna looked at her daughter and smiled slightly. "People survived the war. We will survive this." In the following days, the news spread. America had started the Berlin airlift. Thousands of flights a day bringing food, milk, coal, and medicine from the west into the besieged city. People stood on the street looking up at the sky, counting the silver planes that glittered in the sun. Children called them candy angels because sometimes the pilots dropped candy packages tied to small parachutes. Anna and Clara stood in the crowd watching the candy packages fall like sweet rain from the sky. Clara exclaimed, "Mom, they are so kind." Anna looked at her child, her smile mixed with tears. "Yes, my child, sometimes kindness comes late, but it still comes." However, in that joy, there was darkness. Some people in the East were forced to move to the other side. Many went missing. Women who had endured the war now had to endure separation. One evening, Anna received news that Greta, her best friend who had worked with her to clear bricks, had been arrested while crossing the border to the west. People said she was suspected of being a spy. No one knew where she was. Anna sat for hours in front of the candle, watching the flame flicker like a fragile breath of memory. In her head echoed Greta's voice. Anna, we cannot let them define us by war. Women have the right to be remembered too, as those who kept the world warm. One morning in the spring of 1949, Thomas, now retired from the army, returned to Berlin as a war correspondent. He went to the orphanage looking for Anna. When they met again, they were both much older. Wrinkles around their eyes, gray hair, but their gaze was still as gentle as the first day they met in the ruins. I wrote an article about Trümmerfrauen, the women who cleared bricks to rebuild Germany. I want to tell your story, Anna. She shook her head slightly. Don't write about me. Write about the fallen, the ones whose names no one remembers. Thomas was silent. Then he whispered, "It is because they are forgotten that I must write." In the article published a few months later, Thomas wrote, "If Berlin can stand up today, it is not thanks to generals or politicians. It is thanks to the women who picked up bricks with their bare hands, wiped blood from the sidewalks, taught children to smile again. They are the real foundations of the new Germany, but history is forgetting them." The article was published in many places, translated into many languages, but Anna never read it. She only knew that somewhere out there, someone still remembered them, the forgotten women. A year later, Clara left Berlin to study nursing in Hamburg. Before leaving, she hugged her mother for a long time. "Mom, when I come back, I will not let anyone forget people like you." Anna nodded, tears rolling down her face. She said nothing, just put the old notebook in her daughter's hand, where she had written, "Today, Berlin has the sound of children singing again." That night, Anna sat alone by the window, looking out at the city. Berlin was no longer a pile of rubble. New buildings were rising, lights were shining, but in her heart, there were still the faces that had disappeared, the voices that had fallen into silence. They were the ones without monuments, without names in history books, but who kept the city alive. Forgotten women, not because they were weak, but because they were too strong to be praised. They did not ask for glory, they just wanted the world to remember that they had kept the breath of humanity alive after the war had ended. Berlin, 1952. 7 years after the war ended, the city still bears indelible scars, but amidst the ashes, life still grows, silently, resiliently, like the women who refused to succumb to fate. Anna is now in her 40s. She lives quietly in a small, rebuilt neighborhood along the Spree River. Her house is not luxurious, just a few photographs, a pot of white roses, and a small old radio where Lily Marlene still plays every evening. Every time the melody plays, Anna closes her eyes, as if seeing Greta's face, the faces of her friends who are no longer there. One morning, she receives a letter from Clara from Hamburg. "Dear Mother, I am about to graduate. I met women who were nurses in the field. They said that you saved their lives on the night of the bomb explosion in Berlin. I will tell that story, not in the newspapers, but in the hearts of young people today." Anna smiled, gently placing the letter on the table. Perhaps, at last, memory has found a successor. The frame rotated slowly. The lens panned over the faces of women in black and white photos. A voice narrated, "When history is written about war, people often mention the generals, the battles, the treaties. But there is a part of history that is never recorded. The hands that cleaned up the blood, bandaged the enemy, held nameless children. They did not fight to win. They fought so that humanity could love." Outside, Berlin that spring was bright with sunshine. On the walls that had been blackened, vines began to grow again. Young girls in floral dresses, laughing and talking, carrying baskets of bread in their hands. Anna sat by the window, watching them pass by, whispering softly. Finally, the world has revived, but in her eyes there was still a vague sadness. The sadness of someone who had witnessed the worst, but still believed in the best. That evening, Berlin radio reread a passage from Thomas's old article, the American reporter who had promised to write about them. In every brick of the new Berlin, there is the breath of women who have endured in silence. They are mothers, sisters, widows, small figures who have raised up an entire nation. History does not write their names in words, but in blood, tears and kindness. Anna turned off the radio. She walked out onto the porch, looking at the night sky. The stars twinkled, reflecting on the newly built roof. She smiled slightly, whispering as if to the dead. See, we are still remembered. Germany in 1945, then 1952, and forever after, always carried within itself two worlds, a world of devastation and a world of rebirth. Between those two worlds, there were women who stood still, not as victims, but as witnesses of humanity. They were not heroes because heroes are praised. They were just human, and sometimes being human in wartime is the bravest thing. We may not have lived through war, but we can still learn to live kindly like them. Click to register and join me on the journey to tell the stories that history has forgotten. Forgotten Women ends not with a gunshot, but with the sound of wind blowing through a newly built roof. Because sometimes life is the most beautiful song written after years of devastation.